I'm Marin, and this is Post-its and Pens.
Maybe I know all your secrets, but you tell me stupid lies. Oh, you think you can escape now and got it all just figured out. You can fake it through the ceiling.
Hello and welcome to or welcome back to my channel. My name is Marin, and here you will find a little beauty, a little books, and a little teaching content. So if that sounds like something you might enjoy, I would love for you to subscribe and stick around and join me in my little corner of YouTube. In today's video, I am finally going to share my top 10 books from 2021. So let's go ahead and get into the video. So I had a bit of a hard time ranking these books, mostly because all of these books received 5 stars with the exception of one, which I have put at slot number 10. But I loved all of these books for different reasons. So I'm basically trying to just go through and think about which ones really impacted me, maybe made me a little bit more emotional, that kind of thing. And this is kind of how I've set out the list. So take this with a grain of salt. I had a hard time putting these in any kind of order. And I also have a couple of honorable mentions, which are nonfiction books, which I don't want to put on this list, mostly because for me, nonfiction and fiction books are very different beasts. So I didn't want to incorporate them both into a favorites list, but I am going to mention my 2 favorite nonfiction books that I read in 2021 as well at the end of this list. So stay tuned for that. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into book number 10. We're going to go backwards. Book number 10 on my list, which was Call Down the Hawk by Maggie Stiefvater. So this was the first book in her new Dreamer trilogy that focuses on Ronan specifically and his ability to dream things into being. So I really enjoyed the first book of this series. I felt like it was very fast-paced. I was constantly on the edge of my seat trying to see how things were going to play out. I did not love the second book as much, but the first book was a winner, and it comes in at number 10. Okay, book number 9 on my list is With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. This was the first book that I'd ever read by this author. I'd heard really great things about her writing, and this book kind of showed me why. This book focuses on Imani, who became pregnant as a teenager. So it talks about kind of how she's balancing her life between being a mom, being a high school student who loves to cook and wants to inevitably become a chef of some kind. So basically this just follows Imani through her high school year. I believe she's a senior. I'm pretty sure she's a senior. And basically just the things that kind of impact her life and have made her into the person that she is. I really loved this. It was very visual, you could see exactly what the author was talking about, especially when it came to Imani's cooking. And I just really loved Imani and her grandmother and their relationship. This book was really well written, and it comes in at number 9 on my list. Hey, book number 8 was a book that I read in a single sitting, and that was Here Lies Daniel Tate by Kristen Terrell. This is a mystery thriller, a YA mystery thriller, and it just had me gripped from the beginning. So the narrator in this story is a con artist who tells somebody that he is this missing boy, Daniel Tate, who went missing 4 or 5 years previous, and he is pretending to be this boy because he's not actually this boy. The family comes to reclaim him. There's a big to-do about how amazing it is that they found him, but there are some secrets in the Tate family, and as our main character is trying to navigate this con that he is living in, some secrets and things start to come out. I was fully engrossed in this book. I flew through it. I loved it. Kristen Terrell is definitely an author that I am going to continue to read from because her writing is fantastic. I could not recommend this one highly enough if it sounds at all up your alley, and I loved it. And it's book number 8 for 2021. Okay, book number 7 is a bit of a switch. This is a historical fiction book called Codename Verity by Elizabeth Wein. This details the story of Verity, who is a British spy who gets caught behind enemy lines in France and captured by the Gestapo. So the book is told via her journal entries that she is writing, and we learn all about her friendship with the pilot who was flying the plane that brought her to France, whose name is Maggie. And it kind of just recounts their friendship, their lives together, like in the military, and some of their childhood. And it's very, very well written. I just kind of found myself just kind of sucked into the story. And even though it is very airplane heavy, like there is a lot of detail about airplanes, y'all, so know that going in. The author is a pilot. You can see that in her writing. I loved this book. It did take a bit to get through. It is a bit denser because it is historical fiction that has a large focus on airplanes, but the girls' friendship, their relationship is amazing. The way that Verity is telling her story in these journal entries is amazing. And when it hit like the last quarter of the book, yeah, it immediately became 5 stars. So I definitely recommend this one if you are a fan of historical fiction. I loved this book, and I will definitely be reading the rest in this series. Book number 6 is Fire by Kristen. This is the second book in her Graceling trilogy, but it does not focus on the characters from book 1. It focuses on a female monster whose name is Fire. Fire has the ability to like affect people's minds and make them do things. Her father used that ability for his own gains and kind of drove the country into the ground because of it, because he was really influencing the country's king and making him do some things that were not great and were not very well thought out. So Fire's life basically is her trying not to be like her father. There is a very slow burn romance between Fire and the captain of the guard, and I loved this book. I loved this book more than I liked Graceling. And I am sad that we really don't get much of a look at Fire in any of the subsequent books in this series. But this one, I love this book, and it is book number 6 for 2021. Okay, now here is where it became difficult for me to rank them. So this is the order that I settled on. But any of these could really be kind of interspersed with each other because they all kind of packed that emotional punch that I was talking about. Several of them made me cry. So yeah, these could really go in any order, but we're gonna go with number 5 being The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by Victoria Schwab. This book tells the story of Addie, who makes a deal with who turns out to be the devil, basically, that she's going to live forever. But there's a caveat because no one remembers her. So as she goes through life, as soon as she leaves their sight, they forget about her. And basically it's recounting her life through this entire time period until she meets a guy named, let me look it up, I believe it's Henry. I don't want to get that wrong. Yes, Henry. And he suddenly remembers who she is. So the story kind of takes a turn. At that point, she is recounting her life to Henry, and then kind of you watch like what plays out and why he's able to remember her. And I definitely teared up at several points of this story. Addie kind of broke my heart a little bit. The ending had me all kinds of like kind of surprised, but not at the same time, but just curious to see what would happen next, which you don't find out because it is like an open ending. But I really liked this one. I know that this one is like hit or miss. A lot of people who really liked Victoria Schwab's previous books didn't necessarily like this one, but I loved it, and it is book number 5 on my list for 2021. Okay, book number 5 on my list for 2021 is Aristotle and Dante Discovered the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin O'Leary Sains, or Sens. I never know how to pronounce his name. I'm sorry. This one is one that I had put off for years and years. I'd owned it since it was released and I never read it because it got so much hype and it just kind of scared me a little bit. However, I didn't need to be scared. This book is gorgeous from beginning to end. It just details some of the issues that were prevalent in 1989 and are still prevalent today. So it's very easy to like connect with the characters. Addie is our main character, our narrator. He has some family issues that have made his life very difficult. He meets Dante, they become like fast friends and then more. And it just is coming of age. It's a coming of age story about these two boys who meet each other, and it kind of just flips their world on its head. And I loved every single second of it. I have picked up the sequel, have not read it yet, but yeah, I'm looking forward to reading about Addie and Dante again, and I highly recommend this book. It is very well done. Okay, book number 4 was The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. I picked this one up solely because it was Maddie from Book Browsing Blog's favorite book, and I participated in Whatever-a-thon where you were supposed to read a host's favorite, and I picked this one up because it sounded the most interesting to me. This tells the story of 3 sisters who are witches, and it's basically witchcraft and like the suffrage movement combined into one thing. So it's like women's rights. So basically all women have the ability to do witchcraft. It's built into their stories and their songs and their rhymes and things that they teach their children, but it's been kind of like pushed down and hidden throughout time until these 3 sisters come and kind of bring it all back out into the open. It is a very long book. It is very historical. So like know that going in. There's some magical realism. There is some LGBTQIA plus representation and what that kind of means and meant during that time period. And it's very well written. I loved this book even though it was very long. I really liked the audiobook as well. So just throwing that out there, I did listen to this one mostly on audio. And it's just basically the women's movement and how these 3 sisters are going to kind of play a role in bringing back or bringing forward women's rights in a variety of ways. So really loved this one, and it is book number 3. Okay, and now we are getting down to the top 2. These 2 really are kind of interchangeable, just depends on how I'm feeling at a certain time. But on this specific day, we are going to call book number 2 for 2021, Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Sepetys. This is another historical fiction book that focuses on the internment of people from the Baltic nations when Russia or the Soviet Union kind of reclaimed those countries and brought them back into the Soviet Union, and how it tried to hide people who were very outspoken against the Soviet Union in these internment camps in northern Siberia, or in some cases in prison, depending on what they thought your crime was. This book focuses on Lena. Her mother, and her little brother are sent to one of those camps up in Siberia, and it just details what they had to go through. So the author did a lot of research on this book. She is actually, I believe, she has Lithuanian heritage, I believe. And so she did a lot of interviews and things with various people who experienced this. Even now, like now when this book was released, which was 2011, they did not want to talk about what happened. They were still afraid that like they would be punished if they spoke out. So she really relied on a lot of like hidden letters, hidden journals, that kind of thing. Interviews with people who like wanted to remain nameless so that they could not be prosecuted. And it was heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. Lena is such a strong girl. Like she's such a strong girl, stubborn. She never gave up. She tried to do what she knew was right. And I loved this story so much. This flip-flop between the other book as my favorite of the year all year. Honestly, these 2 could probably be tied for the top. But I loved this book. If you like historical fiction, check out her books because it was first rate, and I have several other books from her that I need to read, and I am very much looking forward to it now that I know how fantastic of an author she is. So Number 2, Between Shades of Grey. All right, and then my top book of the year is a much different book than that historical fiction at number 2, but that is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. So this tells the story of the first son of the United States and the Prince of England and their relationship. They hate each other at the start. It is very much an enemies to lovers book, and it also really tackles like the political side of things and what it means for someone prominent in the US and British government to come out as gay. It's very political, so like know that going in. This is not just like a fluffy romance story. There are portions of this story that absolutely broke my heart. I felt for both Alex and Henry. It just, oh yeah, they were wonderful. I loved this book so much. It felt like a piece of fan fiction, not in a bad way, that I would read, you know, years and years ago, where it would just completely engross me, pull me in, and you would be rooting for these characters, even though like you kind of knew how things might play out. So you have a good sense of like how things are going to go in this book, but I still loved it. Henry in particular is very sad. He had a very sad life, and Alex kind of like brings him joy, and that made me happy. And it also is a look at Alex and what he wants for his future, like what his goals are. And yeah, they're just two very driven young men who love each other, and kind of the fallout of what happens once they realize that. So this book was fantastic. I loved this book so much, and it's definitely one that I'm probably going to reread over and over again, just like I did with my favorite piece of fan fiction back in the day. But love this one. Favorite book of the year. Cannot speak highly enough about it. And that's it. That is a look at my top 10 books of 2021. Now, before we sign off, let's talk very quickly about those 2 nonfiction books that I'd mentioned. Also really enjoying. So the first one was Columbine by Dave Cullen. This is a very in-depth look at the high school shooting in 1999 at Columbine High School. He goes very in-depth with what happened on the day of the shooting, but also delves into what the killers were like leading up, the signs that were kind of missed by other people, and he also talks about the aftermath of Columbine. This one is very well researched, obviously very dark topic. School shootings are not anything that people really want to read about, but I found his kind of look at what happened and his call out of what the media presented, including himself, because he was part of the media and part of the problem, but the media got things wrong and kind of presented that out, and some of those preconceived notions are still in existence now. So I really appreciated kind of how he took ownership of the mistakes that he and the other press made, and kind of what led to kind of the proliferation of school shootings in America now. So really liked this one. This would be like honorable mention number 1. If I was putting nonfiction in my list, it would have definitely rated in the top 10 of the year, but I'm kind of just doing it on its own, as I'd mentioned. The second one is One Last Strike by Tony Larussa. This one details the 2011 St. Louis Cardinals run to World Series champions. It was Tony's last season as manager of the Cardinals, and he really kind of takes you through a look in depth at what it's like to be a manager of a baseball team, especially one that is not performing the way that you think they should be performing. So the Cardinals were 10 games back on like September 1st, managed to make it into the playoffs, and then managed to win the World Series. So it basically just recounts that season, that look at like that climb back into the postseason, and his internal thoughts. Tony was someone who, when he was manager here, you questioned a lot of his moves. He explains a lot of his decisions in this book, which I loved because that was one thing that you always kind of felt was missing with him. He never really said everything that he was thinking, and he tells you why he did not do that. So I just really enjoyed this kind of look inside his head a little bit, and it was really fun to relive that season because that was quite the wild ride if you were a St. Louis Cardinals fan. So that was the other book that I really, really loved this year. And that is it. We're going to close out this video. That was my top 10 of 2021 plus my top 2 nonfictions of 2021. I hope you enjoyed looking at this list. If you agree about any of the books, let me know in the comments. And if you disagree about any of the books, let me know in the comments. But I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you would like to see more, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, everyone.
Greatest mistake.